When I was working homicide in the late 70s, early 80s in New York, it was carnage in New York. But we still had very strict gun control regulations in New York City. Stop and frisk probably had a heavier impact in New York in reducing crime, in taking guns off the street than actual gun control laws.
Welcome to NewsBeast. We've got Paul Callan in, counselor.
Good being with you, John.
It's good to see you. Let's talk Colorado shooter. Walk us through the process of determining insanity via the death penalty.
Well, interesting question. You know, Colorado, first of all, you would think it being a western state might be death penalty friendly. We always hear about Texas and a lot of the other states down there where the death penalty is imposed more often. Colorado's not a death penalty friendly state. It's only been imposed rarely in recent years. There are 3 people, I think, on death row in Colorado now. Death is inflicted by lethal injection in Colorado. It used to be gas chamber, but they switched, of course, in the modern era to lethal injection. I don't think it's an easy state to get a death penalty sentence. Now, let's add on top of that a potential insanity defense. If the defendant in the Colorado case is found not guilty by reason of insanity, of course, no death penalty. He's taken off to a mental hospital and remains there. If, on the other hand, he's found guilty, jury rejects the insanity defense, the court could still and the jury could still look at insanity and mental illness as a mitigating factor that maybe would indicate he doesn't deserve the death penalty. So in the death penalty phase of the case, we'd see a lot of litigation on that.
You know, he booby-trapped his apartment, obviously, apparently to create a diversion. But when he was captured by the cops, he told them immediately about that. Does that indicate mental acuity?
I think it does, and I think it heavily weakens the possibility of a successful insanity defense. Usually in insanity defense cases, prosecutors come in and they say, hey, he could plan, meticulously plan. He understood the difference between right and wrong. The McNaughton test, which is this classic test that's used in insanity defenses, says you have to not be able to recognize the difference between right and wrong and to conform your behavior to that. People who can elaborately plan bombing, diversions, guns,
and warn people about them indicates the ability to differentiate.
Absolutely. So
he seemed catatonic in the courtroom. We're not going to have cameras next Monday, but you seem to sort of think that he wasn't drugged up. It may actually have been sleep deprivation or something else.
You know, I'll be very interested to see how this plays out, because usually at a first appearance in court, the defendant is not drugged. Even if he's taking psychotropic medications of some kind, jail officials don't like to allow them to be administered. They're afraid the guy's getting high or he won't be cute in court. So I doubt that he was under the influence of drugs, but we'll have to see what the medical records say.
Final question. A lot of people don't know this about you, but you were on the Son of Sam case in the 1970s. You worked Brooklyn homicide for the DA's office. You had a sweet stash and shoulder length hair. But the debate we may or may not be having about gun laws in the wake of this act of violence, the question becomes one of reasonable restriction. How was reasonable restriction handled back in the 70s and 80s when you were working homicide compared to today?
Well, that's a great question, but I have to say it differs in different parts of the country. When I was working homicide in the late 70s, early 80s in New York, it was carnage in New York. I mean, the homicide rate was staggeringly high. Yeah. Graffiti was every place. You couldn't walk the streets. It was a very, very dangerous city. But we still had very strict gun control regulations in New York City at that time. Most of the guns in New York had leaked in from other areas. Stop and frisk probably, because it involves guns and gun restrictions, probably had a heavier impact in New York in reducing crime, in taking guns off the street than actual gun control laws.
Interesting. Do you think that there's been generally that the conversation is restricted from what it was, or is your indication that, look, it's not about the gun laws, it's what's going on culturally?
Well, you know, I think actually we're now looking at an America that probably is even more lenient about the availability of guns than back in the 70s. I mean, I think we were starting to have a serious conversation then about heavy restrictions, but that didn't pan out. So whatever has led to a decrease in crime in the United States, it doesn't really have to do with gun control. Now, mass murders, killings like this, maybe gun control is relevant to that, but the general crime rate, I think it probably is not.
Paul Callan, thanks for coming.
Nice being with you, John. Take care.
All right.